Joining me now is Dean Cheng. He's a senior advisor to the China program at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Dean, you're an expert in all of this. First, give us a reality check here. This isn't a formal alliance, but how does this change the security landscape in the region?
Well, clearly the ability of all three countries to sit down and meet together, as has been noted, this is unprecedented, which tells us something, right? We have had alliances with Japan and with South Korea since the 1950s, and yet these two countries, neighbors, haven't sat down together, war with us, in all of that time. Mm-hmm. So yes, this is a huge step forward. But to temper that expectation, the idea that this is a new NATO, that there will be a joint military command, joint requirement setting, joint military planning, I think that is definitely putting the cart several miles before the horse.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, China was in the back of everyone's minds over the course of this conversation. We heard Kristen talk about it, but I believe we have President Biden talking about how this particular meeting wasn't about China. Let's play a bit of it. Actually, we don't have it quite yet, but let's get into that. They can say all they want that it isn't about China, but is the situation with China perhaps one of the reasons that there was an urgency for these three nations to come together?
I don't know that it was the urgency presented by China, but absolutely, China is a factor. The Chinese military activities throughout the region, their efforts in the South China Sea, which is far from these two countries, but sits on the supply lines for both South Korea and Japan, food and energy. The fact that Chinese military forces have circumnavigated Japan and regularly intruded into the South Korean air defense identification zone, that absolutely is a factor. But again, North Korea, Russia, both of those are also considerations. When North Korea tests an ICBM, South Korea doesn't say, oh, well, it's only overflying us. And the Russians have actually been working with the Chinese in intruding into both South Korean and Japanese air and sea space.
Well, let's talk about the relationship between Korea and Japan, South Korea and Japan, which is a big part of why this was such a big breakthrough. Explain to us a little bit about the history between these two countries and why it was so significant that they were both at the table today.
Well, it's not just South Korea, it's Korea in general. And when you talk to Koreans and their views of Japan, they have literally centuries of bitterness to go back on, dating back to the wars of the late 1500s when Japan invaded Korea then. You may have heard of Admiral Yi and the turtle boats. He is a major figure in South Korean history, and he fought the Japanese. Fast forward to the early 20th century when Korea became a colony of Japan and the Japanese were incredibly brutal. And since the end of World War II, the emergence of South Korea as an economic powerhouse where they see themselves as openly competing with Japan in everything from microchips to shipbuilding. So you see a lot of tension in that relationship.
Okay, let's actually now listen to what the president had to say about the impact that China had on this conversation.
I'll just say this summit was not about China. That was not the purpose of the meeting, but it did come, China obviously came up. Not to say we don't share concerns about the economic coercion or heightened tensions caused by China, but this summit was really about our relationship with each other and deepening cooperation across an entire range of issues that went well beyond just the immediate issues we raised.
And it is interesting that he specifically talked about the economic concerns that he has about China, because you can understand from a security standpoint, a national security standpoint, why Korea and Japan's interests may be aligned. But does it work the same way with their economies? I mean, they both trade with China. We trade with China as well. I mean, how does the economics of all of this impact it?
Well, China has demonstrated that it has no qualms, no hesitation in using its economic leverage to pressure South Korea, which it did over the THAAD, the deployment of an American air defense unit there, and with Japan over rare earths. So both of these countries, while they are major trading partners with China, also understand that this is a very large and very dangerous trading partner, not just in military, but economic terms. And then when you throw in the fact that these countries are major producers of microchips and the technology associated with it, and China is intent on becoming a world leader in microchip production, again, this is an economic competition, but it goes to the heart of both the South Korean and Japanese economy.
And to that end, President Biden signed an executive order that was aimed specifically at U.S. investments into the Chinese semiconductor industry and artificial intelligence. Could you see Japan or South Korea taking similar steps?
Not only that, but I think that probably one of the underlying agreements that will be talked about within this framework is the idea of increasing cooperation among all three. We know the Chinese have been doing cyber intrusions into Japan. They are almost certainly doing that into South Korea. So we're likely to see cybersecurity, chip production cooperation, exchange of that sort of advanced R&D that would really make this trilateral relationship go, frankly, beyond NATO in some ways.
Wow. Well, Dean Cheng, thank you for your perspective. We appreciate you putting all this into context for us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.